Okay, this is how I was doing my step 6. Right, we've done the step 5 and now we're into step 6 interaction. So this is where the step itself reads, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So coming from step 4 and seeing the because first of all, the defects of character, like I said before, were just like names, labels. Um, they were still kind of like, yeah, I could say I was self-centered, I was selfish, I could say things like that. But the majority of my life, I had in my head that I was a good person, I was a kind person, I would never hurt somebody else on purpose, and I wasn't a bitch. So because of that, that just made me, my framework was I was coming from, I was a good person. So getting ready in step 4 and 5, it really kind of like opened my mind to actually see, look, to actually, you know, again, the jargon, I had to learn what the defects was. This is why it goes back to were entirely ready, because this is the process, step 6, you know. I mean, I could then look at the self-centeredness, which I thought was so far from the truth of this poor caring little girl. No way was I, if I look back to one instant of even like, say for example, in a meeting, early recovery, in a meeting, wanting to go to the toilet, and the amount of anxiety that would come into me, the amount of train of thought, I was full immersed in self-centeredness. I just needed to get to the toilet without anybody seeing. It was full on living in the middle of self-centeredness. So when in step 4, when I could see all the other defects that I had as well, like all human beings, yeah, layer by layer, they came like, not, they were came, well, first of all, I looked at them as bad habits. I could accept that, once I found out the meaning and I could see it in step 4. But once I actually could see it in, what I found? I found that most of the defects of character was happening, um, was like automatic. It was similar, um, it's like my thinking was similar on the same structure, brain structure, whatever you call it, the way it operated with the addiction. It worked like that with my defects. I didn't know I was actually being self-centered. I thought I was being fearful, but I didn't see I didn't see what, I didn't own the other. I could own one part of it without owning the other part. I was still rigid, right, when I got to this point. Not as much, and I had, especially, coming together with the willingness to open my mind. Once I was willing to do that, it seemed that I could go, but I had to go in baby steps. Because in my mind's eye, and I'm going to be honest with you, in my mind's eye, I thought I had done no harm once I done my step 4. I thought I was a good girl. I was a nice person. But the reality is, I spend a lot of my life on automatically responses that brought me pain. At the end of the day, I see, apart from the self-centeredness, the selfishness, the pride, I was so judgy as a child. I looked out and I seen what was wrong and what was right, and I condemned, the self-righteous. I had all of the defects. I had all of them. It was just I had to get used to just the label of them, and then to hold them, because I had to have them knowing that it's true, because I had a different belief system before this step, from step 4 to step 6. I had different understanding. So and I'm going back to the same first two words, were entirely ready, because this is a process in the sense that you have to, it goes step by step. There's like a couple of little steps in the step 6 on its own before you can go into step 7. There is thing of coming to know what defects of character is, coming to own them more by reflecting back on the step 4 and 5, and then what you call it, and actually looking at your own life yourself and seeing, you know, behaviors that was kind of like my impulsiveness. I was so impulsive. I didn't understand where that was coming from. I didn't realize that was coming from, again, this fearful place, this fear, you know, I would do it really quickly because I thought it's not going to happen, or I'm not allowed to, or you know, I'm not good enough. So under all of them beliefs, pushed out the impulsiveness into me. So it made it feel like that it was automatic. It was an automatic thing that just happened, where I wasn't aware of why I was actually doing it. But coming through the steps, this is what happens. It's the willingness to be open, you know, to open the mind. If you look back on all the other tapes, you will see that the tightness, the kind of rigidity of my mind was so rigid that I had to take it step by step. But you know, I could see, eventually I could name them. Once I could name the defects, once I could relate to them, once I could actually see, oh, actually, yeah, I did do that, or yes, I was thinking like that. You know, I didn't think, and I didn't think that if I went into a shop and I, as a kid, and I stole some chocolate after a swimming pool, I didn't think that was a bad thing. I thought that was just doing something wild or doing something. I didn't see the consequences towards others. So that's where the kind of like broadening of seeing the self-centeredness of who I was. You know, how I operated. I didn't see it. But as I said, first of all, went into, like, I can see it obviously in my step 4 and step 5, or I've admitted it, I've seen the bad habits, now I can see that there are shortcomings, I can see there are defects, I can go to all of that part, yeah. But there was other defects that was in my another layer that seemed to open in me as well. I was able to, by doing 1 to 6 here, and you know, it helped me to get to know who I was. I was absolutely blind to who I was. I was so out of myself, and dissociated most of the time, that I had no clue who I was. So each step, you know, brought back me to myself, yeah. And another one that I found out, and it didn't have named it, but I had used to make impulsive, not impulsive, what would you name that as? I would like see somebody, they act like me, or they say something, I think, oh, yeah, I would think like that. And then I would lock them in as they're like me. That's it, they're like me. And I would give all my trust, all my, you know, loyalty would be fully there. And then they would behave something differently than me, and it would be like a shock system to me. How could they, you know? And I didn't realise this defeating battle that I was continuously in relationships, because I wasn't, you know, from childhood I grew to only see half the picture of somebody. Somebody had to be so good and one has to be bad. And the one that was good, one of my parents who was good, did have no bad parts in them. And the one that was bad, I had no good parts. I couldn't see them, yeah. So as I said, the rigidity started very young for me. It was very entrained. And I started to see like the pattern of like these just happen automatically, you know. Um, like I said, I would take something from the shop, but I would never see the consequences of my actions onto somebody else. I didn't see their side. I just saw my side. I just saw me. Yeah. So this opening and seeing that, my behaviours, and when I seen it in step 4, we talked about through it in step 5, that all right, it did come with a feeling of I was human. I mean, I'm like everybody else. I come out of that box that I had myself up on, the good girl box. But at the same time, what I started to see was I had a train. There was times that I couldn't help, like if I became anxious or fearful or sad or angry, all my emotions had a different shortcoming to protect me. Okay, that's how I operated, and these will come into place without me consciously thinking about it, which automatically happen. So there, it brought me to the fact that I knew that this is like exactly like my addiction. I can't stop doing this. I can see myself doing it, I can own it, but I keep doing it. It's like automatic. It's how my brain works. So I knew that I could not do this myself. So I got to the place where I was ready for step 7. And I was ready to say to myself, I was thoroughly ready to say, and humbly as well, to ask, can you please to take away these defects of character um, that's not only cause to harm to other people, but a lot of these defects of character